Good afternoon. I am here today to tell you about the environment that our hackerspace lived inside Palestine. Okay, something here, just a moment. Okay, as you hear, there's Jerusalem. Okay. Okay. I don't know German, I'm sorry. So here in the picture you see Jerusalem. That's where I've been born and raised all my life. The good thing about Jerusalem, that its infrastructure, technological infrastructure is really strong and really advanced. But the bad thing about Jerusalem, that most of the Palestinian entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, they immigrate their businesses outside of Jerusalem because of the Israeli occupation that gives them a lot of high taxes to pay. So they have to go outside of Jerusalem, for instance, for example, to Ramallah or to any other cities around the world. And actually the Palestinians, they are living in non-obvious. The Israelis occupation gives them a non-obvious limitations for building their businesses inside Jerusalem. This is Ramallah. The city, it is the most active city in the West Bank. Also, Ramallah is not very strong in the technological infrastructure, but it has a lot of people that comes from all around the West Bank. And also, the Palestinian, as I said, the Palestinians from Jerusalem goes to Ramallah and open their businesses over there. So, for me, I had to bring all the hackerspace inside Ramallah because the capacity of high-quality developers that we have inside Palestine, and to have a hackerspace, that means you need to build a community. And because I decided to build the hackerspace inside Ramallah. Why? Because technology is not only the need for hackerspace. It's not the only thing that we need in the hackerspace. Community is more important for me to build the hackerspace. So we are still fresh. We still got the space in Uli before I come here, actually. So we have this small community that we have. And that decision made us a hackers behind a separation wall. Technology and community are both separated now because of this damn wall. And in technology here, I mean only hardware. Importing hardware is a bit hard inside Palestine. So it's not easy to get or find any hardwares inside Palestine. But we still believe in our society because Palestinians are makers. They are really makers. All these handicrafts are made by Palestinians since hundreds of years. So this culture has based on making. And because of that, I still believe that I will find a lot of makers and a lot of developers that will bring the hackerspace to a high level. I'm sorry, I'm a little sick. So the challenges that we're facing inside Palestine, the lack of equipment, because as I said before, there's not a lot of hardware inside Palestine. Importing hardware is really almost impossible because it should pass through Israel borders. We are living inside a circle that Israel controls. Every port gets into Palestine. And to import them through a private shipment companies, it's really high. I will pay double the price. And if I import it directly to Palestine, I have to pay the taxes double. Because I'll pay the taxes for Israel and I'll pay the taxes for the Palestinian Authority. So I'll end up broke. That's the control of imports as well. And to legalize the hackerspace, I had a lot of issues with that. But I ended up with the NGO model inside Palestine. I had to solve a lot of these problems. For example, the control of imports. I had to import some of the equipments by myself, because since I live in Jerusalem, so I get into the Israeli area. So I import all I bring all the equipments by myself for the hackerspace, and I get it inside Ramallah. So I make that bridge on myself. The first project that we run inside Palestine, that was the first project we worked a little bit on it, like 5 months or so. We ran the first project in the hackerspace, while the hackerspace didn't have a real space, a physical space. We just holding our computers and running from place to place to make this project happens. It's an interactive projection mapping. It's based on the cultural heritage and encourage tourism for visiting the villages next to the main cities for tourists to encourage them for the next cities. I'll show you the video now. So basically, this is a church, a very old church in Taipei. It's a village near Ramallah. It's called the St. George Church. We took the concept of the St. George that the famous icon that he kills a dragon. So we put two characters, a dragon and St. George, and they are fighting. The people are really fighting with each other. Two players are playing in front of Xbox Kinect that we hacked. And we made it as a projection mapping on all the wall of the church. So that's the first project that we really made. And from the other side, but I don't have the video, it was a visual art, also projection mapping. So yeah, that's the first one. Sorry, I have to run. Our objectives in Vecbox. It's to make a sustainable community, and we almost got into that because we made a deal with a university, a Palestinian university, that they donated us the space, and we offer all their students to come and work in the space for free. Innovation solutions, we have a lot of people who are really smart, who are really good in development, and they can make a lot of innovations. So that's why I'm making the hackerspace inside Palestine, to make the ability, to give the ability for the people to work on their hardwares. I also am thinking also of making a small port inside Jerusalem for the hackerspace, for the Palestinians who still lives inside Jerusalem and still believe that they can build something inside Jerusalem. Expanding, I'm thinking also to expand and build hackerspaces inside each Palestinian school. The second running project that we are running it now, it's prosthetics. We are building it now for giving the ability to, actually we are developing it for making it able to give it for the victims of the last war in Gaza, who lost their limbs during the war. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Oh.
Hello. All right. How's everyone doing? Yeah. All right. It's good to be back in Republica again this year. I'm going to be talking to you guys today about the fantastic and funtastic unintentions of co-working spaces. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention, that the co-working space kind of phenomenon starting in the US and Europe, based on this kind of idea of they don't want to work anymore in this traditional work style. As a matter of fact, it is this alternative for this new economy, for this digital economy, this alternative to the corporate lifestyle. And based on these common values of community building and knowledge sharing, this is a space right here in Berlin, one of the few places. These places kind of were like a model for a lot of places around the world, including the southern neighbor, and the African continent. This is an image that Bongo Hive, a tech hub, part of the AfriLabs network, started on the Ushahidi map. You might have heard of iHub as well. And you can see that it's definitely been mushrooming in Africa the past few years, including my country, Egypt. A few years ago, my co-founder, Adam, got up and spoke about, after the revolution had started in Egypt, how there's this massive mushrooming of co-working spaces in Egypt. Actually, since that time until now, in the past 4 years, there's probably no less than 30 of these spaces. And we spoke about how finally the youth felt empowered enough to take matters into their own hands, and dozens of initiatives popped up. And we were looking at that Euro model to start, and then adapting it to the local context. Well, since then, there's been a lot of events, and not all of them made it out to Europe, but pretty much we did have our first democratically elected leader who managed within 1 year to alienate everybody except the people in his group, which is Muslim Brotherhood, right? That paved the way to the military assuming control, right, in 2013. Well, that took place, and also some kind of violent backlash to that occurred. And as a result, we were asked as Egyptian citizenry, 4 years after going and gaining our freedoms of speech and expression and the right to assemble, we were asked to give all that away under the auspices of security, right? So, as a matter of fact, it was not just offline, it was online too. And there's a few speeches here about cybersecurity and about the new draft law coming out for cybersecurity in Egypt. Pretty tough conditions. And here's an offline space that the public had reclaimed after the revolution. Now, in this context, it was the Arts. It was a square right in front of the old presidential palace. This is no longer allowed anymore. They have removed us off of the public areas. And when we had all of these different options after the revolution, these no longer exist anymore. Except, and whoa, that's a horrible picture, okay. Except, and this is a picture, very pixelated, it's just cool like that, and of a co-working space. And one of the 25 that I mentioned, and these, what I want to say about this is these are still some of the only pseudo-public places, safe places that still exist. So as the revolution started and the mushrooming of all of the youth trying to get together to actually create, co-create, and develop a better Egypt together, these are the places that actually still remain. A funny story, actually, about a year ago, some people were sitting in a UI UX meeting. It just happened that a lot of those individuals were bearded. Well, if you can imagine just sitting in a room, going through one of your workshops, and then all of a sudden, bam, right? The door breaks in. There's 6 to 8 policemen holding guns up to the participants, telling them to get against a wall, put their hands up, and they start searching them and asking for the ideas until they realize, oh, these are just co-workers. This is a co-working space. We just didn't know about this one. This is fine. They apologized and went home. So it is actually a safe place, but if they already know about it. What had happened is that the neighbors saw a bunch of bearded individuals and automatically racially profiled them, called the police, and they had come to see what's going on over there. So this is just an idea also to give you about the tense political climate that we're in, and that there are very, very few places, but co-working spaces are being one of those few places where you can actually congregate. So our space in ICE Cairo has done this quite successfully. It was mentioned earlier, we're a green tech community-powered innovation hub working on helping helping our coworkers, helping our community set up sustainable businesses that are based on solutions to challenges faced by Egyptian communities. So this particular, oh my God, what is this? so based on, this is a workshop, actually, a PV workshop, and a lot of our community is really into the green energy. And you can see here a few individuals, we've got a pretty much 60-40 kind of mix between the genders. And that's actually another avenue to break down these kind of taboos in a conservative society, another safe place for the women to come out and actually get together with a bunch of people and start creating. God damn. All right, so, and then it's horrible. Okay, so this is actually from the outside picture. This is actually a balcony in the street. You can't really see, but the idea is we did this in really, really tense conditions. We're right next to Tahrir Square. And in the past few years, we've actually had to shut down our hub because through this window, through these balconies, there's tear gas coming through. These are the conditions that we had to deal with. And it's really this crazy contrast between people working and living, or working inside on these projects, while outside absolute chaos is going on. So some of the fun stuff that we got to do was, finally, fun is that we got to work in a lot of socially innovative stuff as well. So while all this hectic, really politics-focused environment fully charged is going outside, we kind of brought in that socially innovative side to see how we can create solutions. And this is, and actually, it became so safe of a place that it became a launching pad for international organizations to interact with the youth through the space. And this particular example is with the United Nations Development Program in Egypt, and how we brought gamification to Egypt for the first time. And you guys don't understand, I mean, on Facebook, you put out the event and you get all the likes, and then what we learned after getting our 1,000, 2,000 likes on Facebook in every event, that not the 2,000 are going to come, right? So this particular one, we said, okay, you got to register and RSVP. We had hundreds of people trying to get into this workshop. So there's a lot of attention around iSky. A lot of people find that it's a very safe place to come and do the work that they want to do. So iSky is not the only space in Egypt. There's also ICE Alexandria, and together we're part of this network of ICE hubs. I would say ICE Alex probably has another safe space within the same context. And together as a network, we try to share the best practices in order to continuously improve on what we're doing and continuously try to give these youth a chance to channel their energies and really start creating those solutions for a better Egypt and being part of the solution. So thank you. All right. Danke. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, okay. Hi, so as with probably 2/3 of the population of the world, I'm a very nervous public speaker. So first off, I'll say thanks for giving me a very difficult act to follow, Mo. And I'll start with 2 questions, and I'll appreciate it if you guys could answer with a show of hands. First question is, how many of you know where your taxes go? Even just like a rough idea of, where your tax money basically go. That's actually a lot. That's a lot more than I expected. My second question is, how many of you know what's going on with your country or your city's education system? That's also a lot. Congratulations to you guys. I'm representing Indonesia, and I have to say that we don't really have the same luxury that you guys do. We don't really get to answer these 2 questions that easily. But today, I'm going to dip a bit into the answers of that we found through open data. So to introduce myself, I'm Denise, and I'm from the Open Data Lab, Jakarta. As you can tell, we work with open data. I'm hoping that most of you know what that is. And We are run by the World Wide Web Foundation, which is founded by this guy. How many of you guys know him? Great, at least still a couple. He's Tim Berners-Lee. So a very, very short background, and this is very abridged. Please don't quote me on this. But how we were brought about was basically a bunch of experts got together, and they were talking about open data and the potential use and impact of it for improving governance. And there was the Open Government Data Readiness Assessment and the Open Data for Developing Countries Findings Report, which brought about the Readiness Assessment Indonesia, and which inspired the lab to be opened in Indonesia. That's, again, a very abridged version of this. What do we do? Our vision, in very nice words, would be that we want to harness the potential of open data to advance and foster the relationship between citizens, the state, and the private sector for a more transparent, accountable, and participatory governance. The approach that we use is basically we focus on 4 pillars, as you see. We call it RIGHT. Sometimes we call it RISE when we change training to capacity building, which is very appropriate for Asia. And basically, the way that what makes us special is that we don't have one model, but we build and develop several different models to answer different solutions for using open data, because we found that there's not one specific model that works. For instance, right now there's a lot of the current trend is that governments see this trend of opening their data, and so everybody wants to do that. But the problem is that even if they do open their data, nobody wants to use it, or the citizens don't know how to use it. So that's the most popular model, but obviously it doesn't work. And that's why we have to tailor them. So just very quickly again, I'll give you a brief background on information in Indonesia. This is a very complicated name, but basically it translates to the Freedom of Information Act in Indonesia, which was implemented in 2008. How many of you know the difference between freedom of information and open data? Yay! OK, so just to explain it quickly, freedom of information means that citizens can legally access government data by request. But it doesn't mean that the government has to proactively publish their data. When you open data, it means that the government actually, well, not just the government, but also the private sector and all kinds of institutions that have data actually proactively publish and share it. So that's the big difference of it. This is a big step already for a country like Indonesia to have an FOIA Act, but we found that it's not enough. There's frustration going on because there's this act, but nobody is taking advantage of it, or the citizens don't know about it, or worst case scenario, the citizens don't know what to do with the data. So what we do is basically we bridge that, and I'll give you 2 of our sample projects. This one is a project that we have in 4 cities, 2 in the Philippines and 2 in Indonesia, and it focuses on fiscal transparency. The model that we use here is kind of the reverse of the popular model today, which is basically we found partners to work with first, CSOs who are interested in fiscal transparency issues, and that's where we started rather than the government. And then we mentored them, we provided them with the skills to engage with the government and what to do with the data in the first place, and then they designed individual projects for their cities, which are La Trinidad and Kidapawan in the Philippines, and Solo and Yogyakarta in Indonesia. So they designed their own little projects, and right now they're implementing it, and we're at the learning and evaluation stage. We found a couple of very interesting things, and I'll focus on the Yogyakarta one because this one is a rather funny story. This book here, and I'm not kidding about this is 5 inches thick. This is the fiscal transparency data for Yogyakarta for 2012 or 13. And they had 3 of those. So our partner was Idea Yogyakarta, and they translated that into a newspaper. So that thing there is basically all the information you see in that paper is the collated information of 3 times this book. What does that newspaper say? It gives the citizens the idea of where exactly their tax money goes. So there's a column for health, there's a column for education, there's a column for social development. And there are sub-indicators there, like for health, how much money went to maternity care, how much money went for public clinics and stuff from 2012 to 2014. That in itself helps the citizens a lot because this already gives them an idea of where their taxes go. So zooming in on it is, we found interesting things like in 2014, the budgetary percentage for health was actually lower than 2013's, but the actual monetary figures were higher, which implicated that the overall budget for 2014 was actually a lot higher. Other findings were like the biggest contributor to the city's income were service taxes from hotels, you know, that 20% service charge, land taxes, property acquisition taxes, and electricity use taxes. If any one of you wants to invest or buy a house in Indonesia, here. Okay, our second project is in Aceh, and it focuses on education. This is a bit of the more traditional approach to it, wherein the government wanted to open their data, but they didn't know what data to open in the first place and what to do with it. So our model was basically to first find CSOs who wanted to work with it, and then help them articulate what they want to prioritize, and they decided on education. And then you talk to the government opens their data, you train both sides, both the government, how to open their data, and you train the CSOs what to do with the data, and then you build a bridge between them, which answers the question of sustainability, because now they can work together with each other. Quick finding was that, for instance, in 2012, based on the data, in 2012, both private and public schools performed worst for the subject of physics, but it would look like in 2014 they were performing best for physics, but actually they weren't. The truth is that their performance for math and chemistry were just getting a lot worse, which raises the question of why did that happen. This is another interesting thing that we discovered. In one of the schools in Banda Aceh, they had 608 students and only 8 bathrooms. That would mean like 76 students for every 1 bathroom. So that's pretty much like 6,000 participants of Republica with a handful of bathrooms in the stadium right now. Or as my friend aptly said, it's like prison. And the great thing about this was that the government actually promised to do something after they discovered this. So to sum it all up, Indonesia is growing right now. There's a very strong hacker culture growing, and there are a lot of hubs popping up in Jakarta, in Bali, in Bandung, and there's an increasing demand and opportunities for hackathons, for meetups, and even just regular citizens or organizations demanding to open up data, which leads to the creation of apps and collaborations and stuff. This leads to a change of a culture inspired by data, and it actually increases the support and demand for open data. That was it. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm from Colombia, and it's a pleasure to be a part with my other geek partners. I will talk about the power of narratives for learning and transformation. We run our spaces in Latin America that are inspired in narratives and local context narratives for the work that we do. So I will talk about our methodology and what are we doing with Apiario. Apiario is the name of the local spaces. So basically, we are a new education model. We are a learning model based in experiences. That experiences are inspired by narratives. So basically, narratives are the way to create situations to allow people to understand who they are, what is their heritage, and how they can improve it. So, for example, if we identify a territory that is an agricultural territory, the agriculture will be our mainstream, and that vocation will inspire us to create solutions and to create applications on any kind of thing that we call do with that narrative, or for example, health or local business. So narratives are the first step in our work. The second one is for sure to work on different contexts. When we talk about content, we talk about content is the king, but context is the queen. So for us, parks, squares, churches, museums, cemeteries, fairs, any place could be a good place to create an experience and to create an activity. Basically, the connections of narrative, of contexts, give us the line to go ahead. But and technology give us the opportunity to create a more engaging experiences, creating content as experience as solution, democratizing creation and development tools. Today we have a lot of creation tools and a lot of platforms to create solutions for our own contexts. So basically narratives, context, and technology are the way that we do to create that kind of experiences. Some examples of that experiences as this first one, bike transmedia. This activity is running in a learning space that we opened in Brazil, in the northeast of Brazil. A fisherman community, in fact, was the same community that a German football soccer team chose for build the training center for the World Cup. I don't know if you heard something about that, but it was the same community. On that community, we opened our first space, our first apiario. The World Cup give for that community the opportunity to give in the eye of the world, and for us to create alternatives and new services and new platforms for tourism. So, for example, Bike Transmedia was the opportunity to create new offers to tourism and to create an experience of exploration and recording that results in an interactive map of the community integrated with augmented reality. Typically, the tourist maps are very boring. If you open a tourist map, maybe you can't choose information about the places. So how to connect the context, the technology, and the narrative to create that. So Bike Transmedia was one of that. Other project was fishing with 3G nets. That project was developed in partnership with some telecommunications companies. So our challenge was to work with artisanal fisheries. Basically, the experience was navigation and stock management for them, and the result was an e-commerce platform to sell fish through internet, to connect, for example, the fishermen and the local restaurants through an e-commerce platform, and to create an application to make that connection and to cut all intermediaries that they have on their day-by-day and working with the local histories. So basically, in our company, we work with a methodology based in 3 topics: discover, experiment, and invent. And what is that? Discovery is a narrative that calls to action, that calls to explore and to learn more about a specific issue or question about the local context. The experimentation is the action to go to the real world, to use mobile devices, for example, to collect data, to make data gathering, and to understand more about that project. And with that data, with that information, we go to the invention. The invention is the making action for develop a solution, a product, or a service with response to the challenge. So our centers, our learning hubs are schools, but they are 2 companies because we create real products and real services for that. different contexts exist, agricultural contexts, health contexts, logistics, handcrafted, market, health, water, energy, education, security. So the mainstream could be connect all innovation to context and to local vocations. In Colombia, we are happening with a very good moment. We are creating one of the most bigger digital ecosystems in Latin America. Our country like now to be one of the leaders to create applications for the base of the pyramid. More than 7 million of public broadband connections are being delivered to rural areas, and more than 5,000 points of internet accesses in rural areas around the entire country. The contexts are creating, for example, in Antioquia, when we are running our second apiario, 80 educational parks. Our apiario is in one of that educational parks, but basically are open public spaces for rural areas when youth create mechanisms for the changes and spaces for teachers and narratives. For sure, we like to create a new narrative for Colombia, a new history for our country. We are now in a negotiation of peace with the guerrillas, and we are now thinking what history we will tell for the world about Colombia. What is this new narrative for Colombia? The forced displacement reduced in 70% since 2003 in Colombia, and 40% less confrontation between armed forces than 2013. So basically, we are in a historic moment. We do have the technological infrastructure. We have singular capabilities of a region. So rewrite our history and put the schools in context. This is an education initiative that calls the school or the centers to explore the world, to explore the real world, and to let the real problems to go inside the schools, to work with significant content, work with significant issues, and creating real projects. So may all be responsible to create new narratives to your own context. Thank you very much.
Hello? Thank you. We have another 15 minutes left, actually. Actually, it was supposed to be a self-moderation, but I give it a start now. You were talking about context, Martin. These were like really different kind of contexts I heard. So just very basic question. Do you understand each other? Do you understand Samer with his problems in Palestine, Denise?
To some extent, yes. But the problem is that, I'm not there. I don't get to see or experience what he does. So, I could understand it from his presentation, but he mentioned like problems with bringing in the materials and things like that. That's something I hear about, but I don't experience it. So for me, it's always this kind of separation form of understanding. And I would think that these guys also kind of feel the same.
Yeah, but what would be the common denominator then?
Sorry?
What is the common denominator? Explain that to the audience. What is actually what?
That each of our countries face a lot of challenges when it comes to, innovation spaces. It's okay, drawing from my personal opinion, there's this big hype about innovation spaces and maker spaces and all these things, and it's a bandwagon that a lot of people want to join right now. But actually, behind the scenes, there's a lot of problems going on, and these are very real problems that everyone has to face. So Samir has issues in Palestine. I'm not even going to delve in Egypt, and it's complicated.
No, I think that every context and every particularity and every singular problem that we have in every country need to be solved First of all, with for sure creativity and innovation. Maybe any technology should be different. Maybe not all innovations and not all technologies should be the same. Any context is particular, but a good connection that, for example, I am having this week interchanging experiences with other GIG people is to identify that we all have the power to change our own context. First of all, connecting maybe not only digital technologies should be necessary, maybe social technologies, or maybe to make something with the things that we have around we. But all we have the potential to change our own context from the bottom to the top.
Actually, I'd like to add to that, Martin, is that in the global south, I think we face a lot of the same challenges than maybe in Europe and in the United States, whereas here a lot of the innovative solutions are around, how am I going to get a taxi quicker, or how am I going to have, the first world problems, whereas we have some really, really serious issues. You mentioned bottom of the pyramid before. ICE Cairo is also focusing on this demographic, and we're losing the appropriate technologies and trying to create that in our maker spaces. And I think this is something that can actually go from hub to hub. Every year, for the past 3 years, a lot of Afri Labs are coming to the Global Innovation Gathering. And I think a lot of this knowledge sharing that happens at this place is very important because we recognize each other's challenges. So, yeah.
Well, that's what I think. I think that every country has its hackerspace or makerspace. Every hackerspace looks at many needs in the country, and they want to focus how to solve these problems. But at the same time, you have the same challenges from the country that returns back to you. They stop you at some levels. I don't know. For my situation, at least, I'm saying that, well, you had guns in your makerspace, so it's also the same. So what I think that sharing all this knowledge with each other and telling each other about our limits and what we did also in Gig, that we have this experience that we share all these things together. It's really pushing us something forward, knowing where to get to and where not to get to at some point.
I usually have a loud voice. Okay, there we go. Thanks, everyone. It was great to hear your stories. I think the power of Gig has been to be able to, share with each other and learn from each other. The success stories are important, but it would be interesting to hear from each of you one thing you wish you knew before you started.
That you would make a lot of enemies.
I would say that I think it's really, really important to identify the needs of the community when you start, trying to create one of these spaces. And that's the topic of our panel here, opening innovation spaces. And to kind of come in from the outside and implant a space is probably one of the worst ideas you can come up with. So it's very important. I mean, in ICE, whenever someone considers that they want to have an ICE, we go to that community and we run an event and we see if the community is involved or not, if they're the ones who are going to eventually champion it and then open another ICE or not. And so I think that's one of the most important things to realize when planning to start at a space.
Well, I came to Republica before I started. Well, yeah, I noticed that there's, for example, I'm talking about my country. I was looking at people and where are they spending their times most of the time. They are always out even after their work. So there's a lot of developers and there's a lot of makers who doesn't anybody care about them so much. They don't spend their spare time in a good thing, actually. So I thought about it. I had I've seen many hackerspaces in many places. So also my studies pushed me to think about makerspaces. I started with building a 3D printer, so I thought, no, I need to do this inside Palestine because there's a lot of people that would love to do such a things, and there's a lot of people who got great minds and great innovation ideas, so they can help the community and help the people to get into innovation things and solve a lot of problems that we face inside Palestine.
Right. I think that, our big challenge is to, in Colombia and Brazil is to connect to the local ecosystems and the national ecosystems, the digital ecosystems. For example, a digital ecosystem in general terms are formed for things: an infrastructure that give you connectivity, internet, any kind of things. Services that use that infrastructure, for example, voice, data, location-based services, so this kind, and these are the offer. So we are in the demand because we create apps that use that services, and that apps that are created for people. For sure, with more people using applications, more infrastructure you will have. With more infrastructure, more services. For more services, more apps. For more people, for more infrastructure. So create local ecosystems is very important. We are only a part of, or a point on the change of that ecosystem, but it's very important to create that kind of ecosystems. I think that this is the main challenge that we have in Latin America to make this kind of innovations happen.
Just also adding a bit to that, I think one of the biggest challenges faced today, and this is not singling out Indonesia, I think this is for a lot of spaces also in Africa, and just generally the global south, it's very, very easy to sell the idea of what we do, because it sounds really sexy. It sounds so positive. It's easy to highlight, the success stories, but there are problems behind it that are very real. Like, I don't want to go into it, but for instance, maybe there's an issue with, say, salaries or accessibility, or you're being shut down because what you're doing might not exactly be something that, a private institution or the government wants or something like that. There are very real stories like that that are a lot harder to address because they're just not in the forefront. They're not the sexy marketing that's going on behind all these spaces.
Yeah, I need to agree with you, Denise. I mean, actually, every year, one of our biggest topics is hub sustainability, hub financial sustainability. A lot of these spaces started with support, either from international. I mean, there's been different business models, but that is the biggest concern. How do we continue in the future in a financially sustainable manner? And there's been a lot of diverse ideas, and I think we're really, a lot of these spaces are maturing and finding out their own ways right now, whereas a lot of other ones are really struggling. So this is, what we want to answer your question. What would, we wish we knew, like a sound business plan to take us all the way into the future. That would have been great,
Hi, thanks for the great insights. And my question was what Martin also mentioned with connecting closer to the local ecosystems and vis-a-vis the private companies and the private sector, particularly regarding things like software development, app development, so maybe less the makerspace. But are you finding it challenging? Are you opposed to working closely with private sector? Because just looking at the demand and where the money can come from for people working in these spaces for startups, the private sector is obviously a choice. How do you engage with companies that are in your local ecosystems?
Yes, very good question. I think that two things are very important. The first one is to connect with the value chain. We are trying to connect any apiary with the value chain and the telecommunication change, the value-added services change, and how we can create the new generation of applications for the base of the for the base of the pyramid in the communities. We strongly believe that that new generation of solutions will not be developed in the main countries or in the main innovation and technology hubs, but we strongly believe that these new kind of services will be developed in the communities in the focus of the problems. The opportunity is, for example, talking about the mobile operators ecosystem of the value-added services ecosystem, are moving to be a mass market, to be a niche market. And it is very important because anyone know more about the problems that local communities are local ecosystems. The companies are very important as well to fertilize and to make our work stronger. We are, for example, connecting some development companies and software companies to help us to create the products that we are co-creating with the people in the communities. So I think that a good approach that a market could do with this kind of opportunities is to make a co-creation with the communities, to go to the community, to maybe put one developer, one designer, and one communicator to live 4 months with people here and to understand all and to create a collaborative solution that could be improved through time. And the other kind of approach for the industry could be as well, yes, social responsibility, but not in the traditional way, but in a new social business approach, connecting the social investment with the businesses, not like things separately of the business. Because when you talk about this kind of, okay, talk with my foundation, we talk with my institution. No, maybe the companies need to create as well a new generation of value, and that is starting to thinking in social businesses that I think that generates impact and that can generate revenue.
I'd like to just give an example of how ICE Cairo interacts with the private sector, and you know, we'd have to divide this. I think Martin already touched upon like the 2 categories I want to focus on, which is, I guess, small businesses, and in our sense, we approach social enterprises, being one ourselves, and then there's the corporate side. So the social enterprise, the smaller guys, and then the corporate side. And we interact with both of them in different ways. So for example, if we're going to have a make-a-thon or a hackathon, whatever you want to call it, to develop a certain product together, co-create, and we invite academia, we invite these social enterprises, civic society, and we all sit there and co-create. Well, you know, the expertise of the, say for example, when we had our solar hackathons, the renewable energy company would come into play here, whereas the big corporate would be, for example, sponsoring the whole event, giving that incentive to the community to come together and take place in these events. So that's one way we work with the private sector in ICE Cairo. Yeah.
Well, one more question, okay? If I don't have the sound anyway.
Danke. A question for Denise. Sorry, no, it's okay. You mentioned, you said you wished you had known before that you would make many enemies doing what you do. I'm just wondering, who are some of those enemies?
No, well, okay. For us, we don't really make so many strong enemies, in, you know, the very, very sense of the word, but you do face a lot of oppositions for it. You face a lot of reluctance. For instance, especially when you work with the government and you want to open their data, one of their biggest concerns is that if we open our data, what stops the citizens from, you know, just changing this data and then publishing it somewhere else and then propagating that false data as, you know, in a negative light or something like that. That's always a concern. You also you also face a lot of other challenges, like when you're working with civil society, for instance, and they're very, very dedicated to something, that they tend to focus on that rather than trying to expand it more. So, for instance, you say, hey, how about we collaborate on this? And then it's a bit difficult to steer it to that direction. It's not like we're running after each other with pitchforks, but there's always a lot of hesitation and a lot of restraint coming from a lot of different parties with that.
Okay. Martin, Denise, Mo, Samir, thank you very much for this.
Thank you.